The Resident Evil showcase centered around Requiem has come and gone without any crazy reveals like Ada or Claire like people were hoping to see. But they did show off some key details and hidden things in the gameplay if you were paying close enough attention, along with confirming a couple of things about the Elpis virus that are pretty important and, in my opinion, are leaning towards a couple of things that we've been saying in our previous theory videos. So today, we'll be breaking down all of the important beats from the Requiem showcase, from the gameplay details you may have missed, Leon's crazy aura forming, theory crafting about the revolver's name, hidden details about the infected, all the way to touching on the brand new gameplay revealed recently after an embargo got lifted for content creators across the board. But before we get into that fully, make sure to show off your hype for Resident Evil by scrolling down and hitting those hype, like, and subscribe buttons to help us reach our like goal of 25 likes on this video, and so you don't miss out on any Resident Evil Requiem news as it comes out. Also, consider becoming a member of the channel to be listed and have your approved and chosen images shown at the end of videos, just like this one. So without further ado, let's dive into everything major that was shown off during the recent showcase and gameplay revealed. Let's start off with a breakdown of the showcase itself. First, they inform us that one of the original directions and concepts that they were working on was an RE9 where Leon was the central main character for this entry, but it was still a more horror-styled game, and they made the decision in-house that people wouldn't want to see a scared or timid Leon again. Which makes sense after all of the events that he goes through with Resident Evil 2, 4, and 6 in my opinion. So I think they definitely made the right call on that one. They then state that in this title, when you switch your protagonist throughout the game, being either Leon or Grace, that it feels like a completely different game, which so far from the gameplay we've seen in the trailers and the demo that journalists got to get their hands on, filled with a section of Grace gameplay, where the vibe is a more Alien Isolation-like, compared to the action-packed RE4/RE6 style of Leon's, this seems to line up with everything we've seen thus far. Also, with the recent addition of unembargoed gameplay being shown off by creators, it seems like we might have a tense mix of Grace, scary, and survival gameplay, where you're rationing bullets and dodging encounters. Then you get to the catharsis later on by getting into the same area, but this time with Leon, where you're able to take everything down in sight that you couldn't with Grace earlier on. This again shows off that Grace's sections are more entrenched in the horror aspects, while Leon is centered more in the action and thrilling tension parts. And the developers state that this gives the full game an emotional range that hasn't been present in any Resident Evil to date. Also, if you notice so far in the gameplay they're showing for Leon, it feels a lot more brutal in my opinion than we've ever seen him go before with the common enemies, giving him almost Mortal Kombat fatality level kills where in my opinion, it just looks like Leon is the final boss, and these zombies are trapped in there with him and not the other way around. Also, in the scene with the brutal shotgun to the mouth segment, the shotgun currently being used by Leon looks eerily similar to the one that Ada is known to use. And for some reason, he also deemed it necessary to take off his jacket from earlier as well, giving him a more sleek but still great look overall. They then tell us that Leon and Grace will have intertwining stories that we will be experiencing in one fluid campaign, where we'll be jumping from character to character in certain points of the story, which again will give us tenseness, followed by high-octane action with Grace and Leon respectively. They then confirmed Leon is still working as a DSO agent fighting against bioterrorism organizations. After that, we then get into the next part where they confirm that this time, there are zombies that will retain characteristics from when they were alive, where they show off a zombie butcher cutting up meat still and saying next, and a custodian or janitor zombie cleaning a window by repeatedly bashing it. They then say there are numerous zombies that cling to their past lives' habits, and that by learning them or seeing them in-game and acting around it, you can avoid some of them altogether. This seems like it will be a critical gameplay component when you're playing as Grace, since they mentioned there will be light resources when playing with her later on. After that, they go ahead and dive into the two different playstyles of Leon and Grace. First, they touch on Leon being more action-driven as we've said before, but this time, they show off some of his crazy and brutal kills, along with emphasizing that he will have a hatchet this time around, which you can parry attacks with and will have to occasionally sharpen after a certain amount of use. Also, they've made it so that if Leon shoots something like, say, the legs of an infected, you can then approach to finish them off with a melee move or weapon like the hatchet, and when you do so, if the infected had a weapon themselves, you'll be able to take that and use it too. These melee finishers with Leon also have vastly varying animations seemingly, depending on what's around in the environments and the zombie's body positioning. With Leon, it looks like not only will you be taking on the usual mix of common infected and stronger enemy types as well, but also groups of them, making for some tense, action-packed gameplay, where you'll need a bit of strategy in order to take them all out. I would assume Leon will have to be taking down some of the bigger bosses in this title as well. We then jump into the Grace gameplay, where they say it takes place in more closed spaces with limited ammo and scary enemies, where Grace looks like she'll be doing way less running and gunning and more picking and choosing her battles, trying not to use up her limited ammo and only taking fights if really necessary. They then state that there isn't a lot of heavy weaponry in this game, but there is a really good and symbolic weapon making it into the game. This weapon in question is the revolver we've seen in the trailer that is actually called Requiem itself. This revolver will, of course, have limited ammo and is advised to be used to get Grace out of tight situations, where we then see Requiem being used, which has a sort of red impact blast on the zombies, and is seen being able to take down 2 zombies in one shot. I think it's also worth mentioning that the red impact blast might have something to do with an alternate ammo type, as in the Resident Evil Showcase thumbnail, we see some red bullets for the revolver in the art, along with regular bullets as well. They then drop an, in my opinion, major gameplay feature where you'll be able to gather killed infected blood samples to mix into a blood injector that you'll have on hand with Grace, where you'll be able to craft different mixtures to use on infected enemies. They've said when it comes to crafting and gameplay in the Grace segments, they've tuned it to try and feel more like Resident Evil 2's Remake in these regards. They then show the injector being crafted, where it has the description saying that it destroys infected blood cells, preventing corpses from mutating, and can be used to stealthily take down enemies, which we see an example of immediately after. After that, they show off the first and third person modes for both Grace and Leon, and if you notice, Grace actually has unsteady and shaky hands as she is aiming her gun, which as the more scared and timid character out of her and Leon, I thought was a pretty nice touch. They then confirm 3 different difficulties, at least when you start the game for the first time, one being casual, a more relaxing and story-based difficulty, standard modern, which is the medium difficulty, it looks like, for the game without ink ribbons for save points being needed, and of course, standard classic mode, which is the medium difficulty with ink ribbons needed for saves. But I do think we should make a note that they did specifically say that the ink ribbons were when playing as Grace in the showcase when it came to using the standard classic mode, which I thought was a bit odd, which may mean for some reason Leon has no ink ribbon saves, and maybe uses something like autosave, since it is shown in the standard classics description. But we'll have to wait and see for more confirmation on that front. After that, they talk about their Porsche and Hamilton collaborations, which look really cool, but are way out of my price range by a couple of thousand. And finally, after all of that, we get into their tidbits on Elpis. They say that there is a secret that Leon bears that comes into play regarding the murder of Alyssa Ashcroft, and that this will be a key part of the game's story, where we will have to unravel that mystery as we play through the campaign. Where they then show off a montage of gameplay moments and cutscenes, showing off some more zombies and a weird infected overgrown baby or person that reminds me heavily of the chase scene you have in Resident Evil Village during the Beneviento house segment. So overall, wow, there was actually a lot talked about and shown off during that 15-minute segment. But what implications have we gotten for the overall story, you may ask? Well, I'm about to break all that down. But if you want to go and get my full thought processes and theories, make sure to go ahead and check out my 2 main other theory videos on Elpis and what I think is going to go down in the story, as they are the building blocks and are important to the thoughts I have about this Elpis reveal. Now, throughout the Resident Evil showcase, we got 2 major reveals about Elpis itself. One is that Elpis makes it so that the infected sometimes keep their habits of their life before infection. This also allows them the capability of speech. Although so far, we've only seen zombies speak only about a word or two. And 2, from the injector description, we know that Elpis zombies will eventually get the ability to mutate, although we haven't confirmed exactly how as of yet. In order to make sense of point 1 and how Elpis will affect and has affected Resident Evil as a whole, we have to go all the way back to Resident Evil 3's remake, where briefly in the remake, they added a section where a zombified Brad bites Marvin, but not before at the time apparently mimicking him and saying sorry back after Marvin said it first before shooting zombified Brad. This, in retrospect, is now a pivotal piece of the Elpis mystery. We know through the Requiem Leon reveal trailer that the White House Chief of Staff had redacted and classified knowledge of what was going down in Raccoon City through its briefly shown document. And through the unredacted parts that we can actually read, we see Raccoon City blank, for the sake of Elpis, commence blank. This has me thinking that the official Raccoon City incident that started it all for Leon was tied to Elpis in some way. Whether it be the fact that Elpis was an ingredient used in the Raccoon City virus, or the Raccoon City virus was an unrefined version of Elpis, I currently have no idea. But I believe these viruses are more tied together than we currently think. Raccoon City may have even all just been an experiment to field test a rough version of Elpis overall. And it has me believing that the reason that they changed that scene with Brad was because they were planting the seeds to having Elpis either also being released in the Raccoon City incident, or was the actual reason Raccoon City happened in the first place. Since in Raccoon City, we now have a zombie that was talking as the Elpis zombies have a tendency to do. Although sadly, I can't really get a good look at Brad's eyes super well to make out if his eyes were wider eyes that the Elpis zombies seem to have in Requiem. Because as I've stated before, I believe Elpis zombies have white eyes because they use some sort of version of the daylight serum from Resident Evil Outbreak. Also, if our theory on Elpis being meant to give the human body immortality pans out, it would make sense why the promo material and newspaper clippings for the promo material references Raccoon City not getting out of quarantine and it getting extended even further. This would be because these Elpis zombies, possibly mixed into the Raccoon City outbreak, never actually died, or are even still being examined and experimented on in Raccoon City to this day. Because maybe Elpis is actually doing its job of preserving the human body even after all these years have passed for the infected. Meaning some remnants of Elpis, or things that somehow didn't die to the nukes, could still be around. Again, that is if my theory about Elpis being a sort of human body immortality serum pans out. As a side note, we also now know that with Elpis, they keep their habits from when they were alive. So it's possible to assume that the person who gets infected could actually be trapped in their own body or aware of what they're doing. If we were right about the previous series, and Elpis was supposed to give the person an eternal body or immortality, but without the side effects of being zombified obviously, it makes sense that they were supposed to keep their free will as well. This would mean it's possible they are now passengers inside their own body due to the infection. I think if this were to actually be true, it adds another layer of horror that goes past the usual when it comes to zombies. And if you look closely, in almost every scene we get a close-up of an infected person's face in the showcase, they look terrified or sometimes even straight up sad, with some seemingly even having tears running down their face, making me think that this might actually be the case, and the infected person might be witnessing the horrors that they're committing as a zombified person. Now when it comes to point 2 for Elpis, this is where the mutations can go up in the air. We could be talking about the more standard mutated enemies we've seen in something like RE4, where the Ganado will eventually mutate a bit into the game, allowing for them to have the tendrils whipping around like crazy, and that you have to deal with that zombie again. Also, we've seen it in other Resident Evil games with something like the Crimson Heads. The thought process with this is that Elpis might mutate the infected to have a sort of second stage that will come into play a bit into the campaign. But another thought I was having is, what if the embiggening of the Elpis infected is the real mutation? In my opinion, I believe we have now seen two distinctly different big Elpis infected. One being the one we saw in the gameplay demo, which at this point the majority of us believe to be Grace's mother, Alyssa Ashcroft. But what about the one we briefly saw at the end of the Resident Evil showcase, and now with this new Resident Evil gameplay? The one that says, "I won't forgive you," and looks more like a big baby in my opinion, with not much white hair like the one from the demo. Also, if you notice, their eyes seem to be the same as the original giant Elpis infected, with the seemingly blind or dull eyes that they have as well. This has me thinking that this may be the mutation that is being teased. Although then the question becomes, how do you determine in-game if one of the infected are about to turn into this? As this would drastically change your playstyle in the gray segments. As if you don't get rid of them or stop them with an injector, you have to start running like immediately, or you'll have to actively start using that injector almost any time that you actually can. And in this new gameplay snippet with this infected, the giant Elpis baby thing is crashing through the walls, changing the map, which I would assume would have to be predetermined by the developers. But one thing we now know from the new unembargoed gameplay recently shown is in the scene where Leon hands Requiem to Grace, Leon blows off the head of the first embiggened Elpis infected that was chasing Grace through the demo that we saw. So, unless this infected actually regenerates later down the line, there is a chance that this is not Alyssa Ashcroft like I first surmised, but a random Elpis infected person who mutated. And the big baby infected we see Leon taking down later on could be someone like the chef we see in the gameplay and showcase who mutates too. The reason I say that it could be the chef is because they have a button-up white t-shirt that the zombie seems to have as well. Which, to be fair, isn't too much to go off of since all of the zombies have white lab coats and are dressed pretty similarly. But I've also taken into account that he's the only bald zombie we see throughout the showcase and the new gameplay as well. Although I was trying to see if I could see the apron around the waist of the big baby, but with the fat from the embiggening that the infected has, I couldn't see any hints of it in any of the frames that I could see through the Leon gameplay. So I think it's possible that the embiggening itself is the mutation being hinted at in the injector's description. But it's also possible that this is just another boss segment with a possible different giant Elpis infected person and not one of the mutation outcomes. Although having this be a mutation mechanic would definitely have me on the edge of my seat throughout the Grace segments for sure. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section down below. Are the big Elpis infected one of the mutations we're going to see that we can actually stop with the injector? Or do you think these are actually just predetermined mini or sub-bosses that we'll see throughout the map? Finally, some last second details from the new unembargoed gameplay is while Leon is picking up the shotgun by the mutated enemy, it does in fact hint towards weapons being upgradable. We also see that when Grace fires Requiem, that her hands literally seem to not be able to take the force. So she has a sort of post-shot shake that also acts as an animation stop so you can't spam shots with her. That is, if you ever even have more than one shot available, since Leon hands her only one bullet to start off. People have been memeing on him handing her a gun with only one bullet, but he did just take down the stalker enemy that he saved her from the trailer with it, which took a couple of shots. And to be fair, she took forever to grab the gun after asking if it was alright, since Leon might actually need it later on. Speaking of which, Leon seems to have the attaché case back with tons of space available, while Grace has a more RE2 remake / RE7 inventory styled system, which seems to have, of course, a lot less space going around. Overall, everything I've heard and seen from and about the game seems awesome so far, and luckily, we only have one more month to wait for the game to be in our hands. When it comes to our theories, we for sure aren't 100% or anything, since it looks like the early Elpis infected person chasing Grace might not actually be her mom after an on-screen death to Leon, unless she truly does regenerate and come back later on. But I'm still pretty confident in Leon being killed by the end of the game, with a passing of the torch over to Grace. Especially with a confirmation that the big weapon in the game being the revolver is actually called Requiem itself. That, along with Leon coming back to where it all started, being teased with these zombies having bits of humanity still in them, talking about honoring all the dead to the infections over the years, Raccoon City itself getting a Requiem, and a Requiem heading into it for Leon confirmed by the developers, all with vastly different meanings to the word itself, just has me seeing red flags everywhere. And when it comes to Elpis itself, I'm more convinced than ever that we might actually be on the right train of thought with where the story beats for the virus could be going, with hints of it possibly even being seen as early as Resident Evil 3's remake change. But anyways guys, that's all I have for you all today. Let me know if you think the mutations of Elpis itself causes the big infected, if you think the differences in gameplay between the two protagonists is something you think you'll enjoy, and if you think Elpis was present in at least parts of the Raccoon City infection, in the comment section down below. For everyone who's made it this far, thank you so much for making it to the end of the video. As always, your support to your viewership, liking, and subscribing is always greatly appreciated and helps me out tremendously against the infected threat that is the YouTube algorithm. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to catch you guys next time. Peace!